to It's Okay to Be Gay, the podcast.
Hey, everybody out there on the It's Okay to Be Gay podcast viewer world, wherever you are tuning in to the podcast right now, welcome back. This is part 2 for the Avis story. Thank you guys so much for checking us out, for joining us. If you are just tuning in for the very first time on the It's Okay to Be Gay podcast, stop what you're doing and go back an episode, because this episode won't make any sense unless you hear the first part.
It's
so
exactly
this is part 2.
Like Back to the Future Part 2. It doesn't make any sense unless you've seen Back to the Future 1, okay?
Exactly. So go back, listen to part 1, and then rejoin us. But if you are, in fact, listening to these in order, and you are on the second episode of the Avis story, welcome back. I'm very glad that you are joining us again. And as most frequently, this is my lovely co-host and cousin, Veronica Witt.
And this is Mr. David Van Etten Witt.
And we have Avis back for part 2 of his story.
Welcome back, Avis.
And just to recap a little bit about his past and about where he came from, in case you did take a week off between episodes, Avis is from Abilene. He grew up in a larger family who converted to the Mormon faith, and he recognized that he was a little different during his typical teenage puberty years, and ended up coming out to his family sometime during the after high school years. And it was pretty well received, especially for a Mormon family. And this is one of the things that we talked about off camera. But I do want to give a little shout out to the Mormon faith, because I think one of the things they do so well is the family unit. Of all the denominations out there, of all the religions, of all the Christian denominations, Judaism, Islam, Mormons really get the family. And I think that's just so wonderful. So Avis, welcome back for part 2 on our podcast. We had such a great time hearing about your story up to this point. I want to give you an opportunity to kind of pick up where you left off and to keep talking about your journey and how you got to be where you are right now. So go back just like one step, and I just want to confirm, it was during your college years that you kind of started to explore your sexuality a little more and accept that, and then you came out to your family during your college time. And you don't have to give the specific university or college name, but where about did you go to school? Was that close to Abilene, or was it a little further away?
Sure. It was, I don't mind mentioning where it was. It was Angelo State University, and I went there for a French major, and I had heard a lot of things about a storied, gloried past of a foreign language department, and turns out I joined it just a couple of years after they had already stopped being a gloried foreign language department. Yeah. But I made a slightly rash decision, and I followed a boyfriend up to UNT, to Denton, which is how I ended up being in the DFW area. And definitely going to say college put a breath of safe measure between myself and my parents, because I worked, but I was still very dependent on the family unit in growing up. And so I was very worried about coming out. And as I mentioned in the previous episode, my father was the one that actually kind of outed me. And it came as a great surprise that I was so well received. And it really opened a lot of doors in my life, in terms of just, my personal life, my family life, all these different things. But yeah, I eventually made my way up north to Denton, and I switched my major. I flip-flopped my major and my minor. So I was majoring in French, and I was minoring in and everyone's going to scream at me that this is a useless degree because it is.
Oh,
Philosophy, philosophy.
I'm an art major.
Everybody's favorite useless degree.
Well, you've got English, you've got psychology, you've got art, and then you've got philosophy, and it's like you want to put in that much work for that useless of a degree.
Yeah.
So, at least with art or English, you enjoy it.
If you have a philosophy degree, that opens up a lot of doors for you to do things like teach philosophy.
Well, exactly. That's what I wanted to do. However,
That's better.
Yeah,
One door.
that is about it. No, there is hope. So I'm a copywriter. I'm getting into grant writing. I'm doing lots of other things, and none of these things would have happened if I didn't have my philosophy degree. Granted, would I have other opportunities if I had studied like computers? Yes. Like, but
I'm kicking myself for not getting a computer science degree, so I feel you on that.
I think that's almost every single person ever who's listening to this right now. So
I'll go back to school just for computer science.
But no. I definitely came into myself and came into my like who I wanted to be in college because there was that distance between myself and my family. San Angelo was an hour and a half away. Denton is 3 hours away from Abilene. And so when I was further away from my family, I felt more comfortable speaking my mind and, just sort of being open, being out, being gay. And as I had more and more conversations, even with occasionally I would see missionaries on campus. And one time I even saw this girl who was in my French class, and she was very meek, very like quiet and subdued, and usually didn't stick up for herself at all. And the missionaries had cornered her. And again, I have nothing against the Mormon missionaries, but I was just like, not today. So I went and I made up a bogus assignment. I was like, hey, by the way, Sally, or whatever her name was, what was the homework assignment? Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What was the homework assignment? And she was like, it was page this one. And I was like, thank you so much. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Can I help you? And and yeah, I ended up having a spiritual debate with the Mormon missionaries while they were on campus. But I was like, you're not getting Samantha. No. And so
no.
Yeah.
That's funny. I love it. So you also have a little bit of a background with hermeneutics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so explain to people who might not know what that is a little bit about what that is, because I think that's very, Veronica's like, I don't, yeah. So I mean, we've already talked about this a little bit in the past in some of our previous episodes, but I was in seminary for the Catholic Church for 2 years. So I understand all that. And we too, studied philosophy while I was in seminary. So I share a lot of these pains and sorrows with you.
Yeah.
But I think that's very interesting that you have a background and that you studied that a little bit. So go into that just a little bit for us and talk about what that is and why you looked into that or why you got involved with that.
Sure. So whenever I went to UNT, hermeneutics was sort of the hot girl in the philosophy world, and everybody wanted to study hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is essentially there's two schools of thought for hermeneutics. One of them is biblical hermeneutics, where it's the study of the Bible, and you study translation and text and context and things like that. And then philosophical hermeneutics, I would argue, is the study of conversation, the dissemination and transmission of knowledge, how we communicate with each other, how we understand meaning. It's kind of like a mix of epistemology, which is how do we know what we know, and existentialism, which is how do I have and live and make peace with an authentic life in a purely absurd world. So if you smush those two together, you get, how do we understand meaning when the world is so fraught with misinterpretation, disinformation, the ability to misunderstand? How do we find meaning and find truth in a world so rife with chaos, you know? So
Yeah.
it's sort of like the study of communication mixed with I don't know, a sort of like organic human, not psychology, but while taking into account the human predicament of being naked and afraid. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. No, that's just such an interesting topic, and I think that that lends it so well to having conversations about just so many different things, and especially our human sexuality,
yeah,
and about embracing our true selves and living that and everything else. So I think, like, when you mentioned that that was something that you talked about, or something that you had studied, I was immediately like, ooh, go into that some more.
yeah.
So
There's a
yeah.
lot of really interesting philosophers who specialize in hermeneutics. Again, I lean a lot closer towards the French school, believe it or not. Anyways, no, but the French school of existentialism and Jean-Paul Sartre, and I'm a pretentious brag, but no, I really like that school of thought, because it does take a very stern, hard look at just the human predicament, what it means to be happy, about, how to live your most authentic life, not necessarily like in a self-help kind of way, but in a very critical, kind of glacial sort of way. And that turns a lot of people off to it. But I adopted this as my modus operandi a very long time ago. Actually, as a child, I'm going to date myself real hard.
You already said that you were 34 in
Yeah,
Portland, so
well, still, like Microsoft Encarta. Do you remember that?
yes, yes, I
Yeah,
had the disc set for
yeah. No, I
All right here.
yeah, I had the CD disc set,
yes,
and
100%.
yeah, so I had that, and instead of looking things up in the encyclopedia, I looked them up on Microsoft Encarta, and
Love it.
two of the most like common searches I did were French and poetry. And so essentially, like all my life, I just wanted to be a beatnik. Um, I wanted to be French. I wanted to smoke cigarettes. I wanted to drink coffee, and I wanted to read poetry and talk about philosophy in France. And all of those things were, of course, contrary to being Mormon. But I think somewhere deep down, I realized that I wasn't quite like other people that I knew. And I felt like in my head, in my 8-year-old head, that the logic was, if it's okay to be this way in France, to read poetry and smoke cigarettes and drink coffee and be kind of fashionable, um, then that was a place that would be safe for me. And so that's why I wanted to be a French major like all my life. And
Mhm.
then when I got a little bit deeper into my college education, the philosophy started also being very French. And I decided I was just going to lean into it even harder, you know? And so, yeah, I studied philosophy and I studied French, and it was good, and it was what I needed at the time. Again, do I wish I had studied computer science? Yes, but yeah, it definitely informed how I sort of like came to terms with being gay and being okay with myself, because eventually I asked myself, like, how do you want to live an authentic life? How do you want to be okay in your own skin. And I had studied existentialism so much, and like Sartre and Camus and Beauvoir and feminism and all this other stuff for so long, that I was like, okay, no, this is what I should do. I just need to lean even further into this. And so that's what I did. So yeah, college definitely influenced my identity and my comfort with my identity. So
That's awesome.
It's really cool.
hmm.
I love that. So, in terms of like your acceptance of yourself as a gay person, like during college, you finally like were able to come out of your shell, kind of off on your own. And I think this is a pattern that we've kind of seen, Veronica, like with a lot of other people who've been on the podcast so far, that we've talked to as well, is that like once they kind of left the
The nest.
unnecessary like burden of living under their parents' roof, they were
Yep.
able to finally just be like, "Oh my God, thank you,
Yeah.
Jesus!" Like
Yeah.
I'm finally able to go off and like do my own thing and like date guys
Embrace
or
it. Yeah.
explore, my sexuality. Um, and so it seems like that's a very common trend. And I mean, had I been in a different situation in my college years, I probably would have done the same thing. Um, but yeah, so during your college years, like you finally were able to kind of like be yourself and to come out as gay. And like did you have any like other like gay friends during your college time, or what was your college experience like that like kind of formed you? Were you just out there like finding the one-off like other gay person that might have been on campus, or how did that look?
Yeah, I definitely gravitated and made very, very close friends with lesbian couple Sam and Bree, and unfortunately, one of them has passed away during the pandemic. But
Sorry.
yeah, but it was life changing meeting. They were just a tiny bit older than me. They're about the age of my sisters, and so I kind of looked up to them as my sisters. And they showed me what it meant to sort of be an intellectual. They told me about references, and they told me about literary themes in the books that I was reading. And
Oh,
it was just like incredible, incredible friendship that will stay with me until the day that I die. And I moved with them. Again, we sort of moved in a caravan from San Angelo to Denton. Uh,
uh-huh.
it was myself, Sam and Bree, and the guy that I was dating at the time. And it was sort of, we all just sort of like collectively moved to DFW. But it
Okay.
really wasn't until college that I did start making friends, that I started actually feeling comfortable enough to say, like, oh, yeah, by the way, actually, I'm gay. I'm not, again, in high school, when you're in Midwest Texas, you say that you're bi if you're brave enough to come out, because then you can at least retreat and be like, no, I still look pussy. Sorry, my apology. Right? Anyways, yeah. I still
Oh,
have sex with women. But you retreat to that if anybody tries to call you, a slur. And
Right.
but yeah, it wasn't until college, when you do have that safety net away from your safety net of your parents, that you feel comfortable and independent enough to say, I live in my own place, I live in my own space, I'm going to be gay. And so, again, like I knew that I was gay, but I also knew that it wasn't safe to be gay while I was depending on my parents at the time when I was that age. So,
right.
Right.
Hmm.
Interesting. So, at what point were you, I guess, like comfortable in your skin, comfortable being gay to like those people around you, to your maybe your coworkers, to like just anybody that met you would be like, oh, that's Avis, he's gay. Like,
Yeah.
and it's not something that you have to like introduce yourself, you know, be like, oh, hi, I'm Avis and I'm gay. But like just people kind of know that about you. So like at what point did that happen for you?
It
So I think
definitely,
for everybody it's a little different.
yeah, absolutely. It definitely came in stages because it's like if I was comfortable saying I was gay at work when I was 20, I was not comfortable saying that if I went to like a family reunion, you know?
Uh-huh.
So like the time when I was completely, absolutely 100% out to my family, didn't care, you know, anybody that I meet on the street, I'll be like, I'm gay, go away. I'm gay, move. I would, it would have been probably like 23-ish, 22.
Okay.
But I definitely started making those moves when I was 18, again, saying that I was bi and saying that,
Mhm.
like, no, of course, I still like chicks, duh. And
Yeah.
not the case. I mean,
They'd be
chicks are
like,
great, but
no.
yeah, yeah.
Of
But
course.
yeah, and then like even getting into college, I would still, because when you live in Texas, you learn to read a crowd, you learn to read a room. You know, you definitely know when you're in danger versus when it's okay to
Be
be your
gay.
100% authentic self. Yeah, yeah, exactly. To be gay. So, and you know what? I don't think that there's ever a time whenever anybody is truly completely out, because if I go back to Abilene, if
Right.
I'm in a restaurant and there's a bunch of, you know, side-eye scary like not Christians, but anyways, like a bunch of side-eye scary people, I'm
Other
not
Christian.
going to like I know that I can raise my rainbow flag proud, but I also know that I don't have to. So I'm not saying that anybody should ever go back in the closet ever, but
Right.
also just in the question of self-preservation and safety, sometimes again it's learning to pick your battles, and it's also learning that like to it's not run away to fight another day, but it's definitely an idea of this is not the time that I need, like this is not the most useful use of my identity right now. Like my identity is going to be stronger and be more for the movement and be more for, you know, progressing other people's hopes, desires, goals, dreams if I do this tomorrow instead of today, you know. And so
Right.
it's just like it's a constant sort of like balancing act of like, yes, it is safe. Is it the best idea? Yes, no, maybe. We'll figure it out on a case by case basis. And so
Yeah. Can I ask, does that get exhausting? I just as a heterosexual person, like, does that get exhausting? I mean, really, it sounds. I mean, I don't want to make the comparison of like woman things too, but like certain areas I don't walk to my car alone, or I know that I
exactly.
parked my car in a certain space, you know, depending on the
Hmm.
city I'm in or what time of day I'm out. But I I feel like I still am a woman. I don't have anything to hide, you know. So that's why I don't know how that would be for you to
I,
have to basically hide it. I mean,
I think that that's an excellent analogy, though, because you do know that at any time you can be flirtatious or sexy, or you can, you know, quote unquote, like flaunt
hmm
these parts of yourself that you're incredibly proud of.
hmm
But also, you know that there are certain times and places where it's like, I'm gonna tone it down.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
know that like my truest, most authentic self could, you know, like fly this flag high, but also I'm in a part of town where maybe I don't need to fly this flag, you know? And
sure,
so I think that's an excellent analogy because I think that a lot of people struggle with that. Some gay men that I've met lean 100% into it, and they're like, no, absolutely not, never again, I'm never going back in the closet, I'm going to be out and proud no matter what. And I commend them, because I like that is a tenacity and a force of will that I don't have. I don't. However, I've also seen it go the opposite direction, where people are so afraid to express even just the tiniest part of themselves as a genuine expression, that they end up being sad, and it's unfortunate. And it I don't want to say it's all about striking a balance, because sometimes it does call for being loud and proud and outrageous. Like, we have Stonewall because people threw bricks, and like nobody was being meek during Stonewall, you know.
Right.
But then at the same time, like, if you are the lone person in a small town where like mob rule is a very likely possibility, you have to preserve yourself so you can eventually move on and do something better, or something other, you know. And so yeah, it always is. There's no one solution to anything fits all. It's definitely an ongoing conversation, much like hermeneutics. Yeah, it's a constant, ongoing, evolving conversation between multiple nebulous parties. So yes.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's like very wise. We've had Veronica and I, and my other co-host Aaron and I, like, have spoken to a good number of different people, and it's interesting that, you know, depending on where somebody lives and what their experience has been, they're like, no, I'm just gay all the time, and everybody that knows me knows that I'm gay or knows that I'm lesbian, and when I introduce myself as this and this, and like that's just part of who I am, and like if somebody doesn't like it, well, like who cares, like, you know. And like there is no like off, like they're just
Right.
on all the time. And
which is commendable, which really is like fantastic, but also at the same time, as I'm sure that you're getting to, is it there is a very specific fine line when you realize like self-preservation is a bit more important. And
exactly. So, like there's a time and a place that like you don't need to hide the fact that you're gay, but you also don't need to like rainbow flag all over the world that you're gay. Like you can just exist in a state of like being without like openly representing your sexuality, and that's okay, you know.
I don't think that I've ever actually gone back in the closet. There have been times when I've been mum about being gay, but I don't think I've ever lied about being gay.
Yeah, there's a difference between like not saying something and like, and then like reversing, you know, 15 years of progress and be like, oh yeah, no, I'm straight and this is my girlfriend, wink wink, when that's not the case. So there is a huge difference between that, and I don't think anybody listening would want to hear that, yeah, you should pretend, but also like wise words from people who are almost in their 40s, like, you know, feel out the room, like know your audience kind of thing. Like you don't need to be talking with the lisp and wearing your rainbow headdress like all over town, in certain parts of the country. But but like you don't need to say that you're not gay, but you don't need to present 100% of the time as gay, like even though that's who you are, and it's fine that that's who you are. And we talked about in a couple episodes back about we had a student of mine. He was actually you know, a gay man, and young in his 20s, and like we talked about the concept of like code switching, and it's like in this group of people you act a certain way, and in this group of people you act a certain way, and then there's like this small sliver of people who get to see the authentic you, And that's it's a shame, but unfortunately, like that's a reality for a lot of people in a lot of different areas. So like read the room, I guess, is like the wise words of wisdom, but
Yeah.
also like don't ever not be yourself, but you don't need to be like the loud, obnoxious, out like boisterous, like flamboyant in some situations. Like it's okay to be gay, but
The
like
name of the podcast.
yeah. It's okay to be gay, but be smart about
Well,
it.
yeah, just preserve yourself. And
Yeah.
the I know that I'm getting older because I'm saying the youth unironically. However, um,
Yeah. You've been there.
yeah, no, but like it is heartening to see the youth taking a stand and saying like, no, I'm not going to apologize. I'm going to be this way all the way. If you don't like it, perish. Like
Yeah.
awesome, good job.
Right. Right.
But until that happens, until this uh, incredible and valid dream comes to fruition, until then, just be careful, kids. But
Talking to you. If you're listening, we're talking to you.
yeah, I mean, like I'm gonna sound like an old boomer or whatever, but it's just like back in my day, it
No,
like
60% viewership is 25 to 30. So
there we go. All right, so okay, then back in their day too. That's why you're old,
yeah.
but yeah, like seriously, we all kind of understand and know what we're talking around. Is that
Mhm.
like yes, absolutely, be proud of who you are. Go to Pride, wear the rainbows. Don't go to Pride, don't wear the rainbows. Do whatever you want. Be proud of who you are, but
Right.
there are certain areas where you don't show off the fact that you have an expensive purse because it might garner you unwanted attention. There are also places where you probably don't need to show off your queerness because some people in certain areas are small-minded and they will do you harm. So yeah, like know when to pick your battles, know when to read the room. That is like the number one life essential skill. Know when to read the room. So
Agreed, 100%. And I think that that applies in so many different situations, in your professional life and your
yeah.
personal life. Just know when to read the room. And it seems so easy, but it's definitely a skill and it's definitely a learned,
Mhm.
thing. And for everybody, it's a little bit different. For Veronica, as a cis heterosexual female, uh, like her reading the room in terms of her interactions and correspondence and communication with people is a lot different than our interactions with people.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's incredible. Um, so you've gone through, Avis, like this incredible experience of growing up in a relatively small town in
Mhm.
conservative Bible Belt Christian church on every corner, Texas, family that was Mormon, but miraculously
God.
accepted who you were and off to college, and you studied some really interesting things and learned so many different points of knowledge and have taken that and it's all built you into who you are today. So how are you living right now your best self?
Well, I won't say that it's my best self all the time.
Well, it never is for
Well,
anybody.
right. What I would like to say is that actually, in fact, I do struggle with depression and with anxiety, and I take medication for it.
Okay.
And I'm
Well,
seeking out. Go ahead.
I'm going to pause for a second because that's something that like so many people don't talk about,
Yeah.
and it is incredibly prevalent within our community, the LGBTQ community, but also even outside of that, like the normal person. Um, the concept of like mental health and doing something about that is not something that is discussed enough or talked about enough, and it's not normalized enough.
Right.
And I listen to a slew of other very popular podcasts, and that's something that they do very well, is just being incredibly open about mental health issues and
Yeah.
about what they do about that. And uh, if anybody out there listening like takes away one thing from the podcast, like let it be that it's okay to be gay. But if there's two things that you take away from this podcast, is that it's okay to be in a state where your mental needs require you to seek some sort of counseling or therapy, or in some cases some sort of like prescribed medication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's okay, you know. So it's incredible that you're in a situation right now that you're going through those things, but you're dealing with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to like monopolize on that point for like 1 second. It was actually like 45 seconds. So I was watching the timer, but anyway, but yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. So it's really helpful to hear that, you know.
Yeah. I remember looking at like podcasts and some other self-help materials, and the idea that it's okay and it's going to be okay, and everything's going to be fine. That always, I mean, like, yes, it is necessary and helpful and important. However, sometimes as a person who was depressed, it came off as a little bit cheap. And I don't think that it's cheap. I think that we end up convincing ourselves, like, as paradoxical as this sounds, depression is very, very comforting because you know exactly what you're going to get. You expect something, it happens, you are not disappointed. You know exactly how your day was going to go, and it went that way, and ta-da! And it's a self-fulfilling, referential cycle, and that's how depression and anxiety and other mental duress can become so prevalent, is that it's reliable, but the flip side is you eventually do have to pull yourself out of bed, and you eventually do have to clean up your room, and you eventually do have to take the shower, and you eventually do have to reach out to that person and that friend. And when you do those things, it legitimately does actually get better. It's
Right.
kind of this weird, like, it gets worse before it gets better. And honestly, if that had been the slogan, it gets worse before it gets better, I would have bought into that more. I'd have been like, okay, I believe that. Yeah. I can see that. Yeah. But yeah, I try to live each day with the knowledge that, you know what, like, some days I feel like my life is a nightmare. Some days it's a genuine, it's a show, and I'm like, oh, I never planned for this. This was never in my 5-year plan. I was never like expecting to be like crying on the kitchen floor, but giving myself enough mercy and enough grace to say, I wasn't planning on this, but there is still enough grace and wonder in the world around me. I mean, like, yes, when you're in the thick of it, when you're in the weeds of it, you don't see the grace and the beauty of a dewdrop and a daffodil or whatever. But still, even when you're at your lowest, when things are getting worse before they're getting better, that's how I try to live my life. I try to remember and hold on to that moment of like, you know what, I thought that it was the absolute worst. I thought that my life was going to be ruined by being gay, and here I am at a actually sadly much lower point sometimes,
Yeah.
but but still, like, I have risen through the difficulty of the challenge that was the terror of my life being gay, and I've made it to a completely new mania. No, but no, um, but no. The point still remains is that you know we only go to more difficult situations and more difficult challenges and struggles. And if you look back at the things that you struggled on before, you realize like, hey, I can actually handle this. I can do this. I can get through these things. And
Right.
the only way that you can get through it is just by being kind to yourself and recognizing in yourself, here are the things that I'm good at. Here are the things that I'm sad about and not good at. And how did I make it through the last one? And then you move forward, because that's the only way that you can go, you know. That's literally the only direction you can move as a human being in these three dimensions. Is the only way you can go is forward. And even when it all feels like an absolute nightmare, you can only move one direction. You can only move forward, you know. And I don't know. I'm sorry if I front loaded that question a lot. It's just,
Wow,
it's
that was
been on my
perfect.
mind a lot too. So
Well,
Yeah.
I was going to ask, maybe after that, like, what would you tell somebody who is listening right now, who is going through similar things that you have gone through? And I think you just covered that. Like,
yeah,
just
yeah,
keep
no,
moving forward. Like, you
yeah,
literally can only move one direction in this time and space that we exist in, and that is in a forward motion. And yeah, just keep moving forward.
yeah. Like,
Okay.
yeah, the bumper sticker might be it'll get worse before it gets better, but the point to remember is it does actually, in fact, get better.
And eventually, yeah, right?
Yeah, like I was absolutely like a jaded jerk asshole, and like I listened to plenty of music that was very depressing. And as a teenager, I was like, "What do you mean? It speaks to my soul." But as an adult, I listened to it. I'm like, "Wow, my parents were right." But you know, being edgy and being angry, like, that does have its place. But when it becomes to the point of being self-defeating and saying that it won't get better, that's when it's truly like a not great place to be. And like, I'm thinking of like a mindless self-indulgent song called "It Gets Worse." And like, in the moment when you're angry, when you're mad and you're listening to it, you're like, yeah, it does get worse. Sometimes it does in fact get worse, but you can't exist in that space. You can't maintain that over and over again. And that's also just for the simple fact that it doesn't always get worse. It does in fact get better, you know. And
Yep.
if you're going to live your whole life in this state of wrath and anger and reactionary just retaliation, you burn yourself out. You know, you're burning yourself at both ends, and it's not sustainable. And there's so much more to be said about, you know, that being compassionate is so much more punk than being angry. You know, like, like,
Everybody's
empathy
angry
is,
these days. Be
yeah, yeah.
nice. That's what's different.
Empathy is the true act of like punk anarchy than anything else. And so, yeah.
What an incredible adventure of a life. And what wise words, I think, Avis, that
Absolutely.
you have shared with everybody who's listening. I I think your story is incredibly relatable. and I say unfortunately because like there's so many ups and downs that are unnecessary in this experience of being part of the LGBTQ community, but at the same time, um, it's still something that is so wildly unnatural, unnatural, I guess, that it's like a wild card, like how
Yeah.
people are going to respond to this. Um, some people tell their friends and family, and everybody's like, "Oh, cool, yeah, I knew you were gay since you were 3." And then some people tell their friends and family, and they're completely ostracized and cut off from the family inheritance, and like no longer get Christmas cards from grandma, and no longer allowed to come and stay at their godfather's house, when they're visiting in town. That's not personal at all.
Right.
Personal at all.
It 100% was personal. I don't know. It's just so bizarre how this is not something that's just like, do you think that we decided one day to like, oh, I'm gay? Like, no, this is who I am. This is who I was. Like, this is mom and dad. Like, you made me this way. Uh, I didn't choose this path.
Yeah.
Like, I was literally born with this inclination to feel attracted to the same sex, or to feel like I should have been born another sex, or to feel like I am comfortable loving every type of person. Like, that's is a type of that's who I am as a person. And the fact that that's still something that is not like widely accepted, um, is it's so confusing to me.
Bizarre.
I think that you're absolutely right. I do think that we are born with an innate sort of inclination. However, I do think that if you're never exposed to an idea, then that idea can never take root. And so that's why, gay people throughout history may have never identified as gay, or may have never understood the fact that they liked people of the same gender or the same sex, because there was just never a way to understand that facet of their personality. And so I really do think that the bottom line is you really do have to keep learning and keep exposing yourselves to new ideas, and you have to keep your mind open to different things, because it's not that people who never understood the concept gay weren't gay just because they didn't identify as gay, but their life could have been so much more richer if they had been born in a time and a place where learning about the concept gay or queer or anything, that could have led to a more rich or multifaceted life. And I really do think that the day that you quit learning is the day you start dying. And so if you just keep exposing yourself to new perspectives, to new ideas, don't become a curmudgeonly old boomer and be like, kids these days. Like, no, like the youth are usually right. We were youth and we were right. So the youth now, they're probably right. And so
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Travis, this has been a wild adventure and just an incredible story that you've told. And I think there are so many wonderful nuggets to take away from your story and your journey, and to the point where you are in your life right now. It's unique and at the same time relatable. So just thank you. Like, this is just awesome.
Absolutely.
Like, and that, I mean, this was my hope when Veronica and I were kind of hashing out the concept of this podcast. I think you are the absolute perfect example of like the person that we
Poster
were like
child.
hoping to come on and like share their story. And it's just so there are so many people out there that I know thousands of people out there that are just like you, that have gone through the exact same things.
Yeah, the pleasure's been all mine. And I mean, who doesn't like waxing poetic about themselves? But
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Every time I talk to somebody, I'm like, yeah, so it's a podcast, and like you get to come on and just like talk about yourself. Like all the gay people are like, oh my God, yes.
we like to do that. We do. But
But no.
like for real though, this is an incredible opportunity to hopefully reach someone who might be going through something that I was going through when I was 15 and
Yep.
downloading podcasts from LimeWire. I wasn't downloading podcasts, but anyways, no. If
it's the same thing, and we're going through the same cycles. Like it's just different platforms that we're using these days, you know. So, but it's beautiful, and just thank you, because everything that you shared about your experience growing up, everything that you shared about your family and your background, everything that you shared about, you know, from the time that you knew you were gay till the time you came out, and like what you did with that since, I think is just it really I feel will resonate with so many people. So this is just gorgeous, and I love it. So thank you again. Appreciate that.
Thank you both. And
Absolutely.
Veronica, David, you've been incredible. And again, the pleasure has been all mine, no matter what. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, for everybody out there listening on the It's Okay to Be Gay podcast, whether you're tuning in on Spotify or Google or Apple Podcasts, we really appreciate you listening. We have actually hit a landmark, and I know that this number will change by the time that this podcast actually posts, because we do record several weeks in advance. But we have 400 unique listens to our podcast at this point. And that's just like an incredible milestone in my mind. I never thought that, you know, 10 people would listen to our podcast. So the fact that we have 400 unique listens is absolutely amazing. And what's even more incredible, and I posted this on our Instagram channel, but not just in the United States. We have listeners in Australia, Canada, the Netherlands, Bangladesh, Mexico, Israel, Kenya, Vietnam, South Africa, and Japan even. And I just think that's so incredible that we are reaching literally around the world right now, in terms of our reach. And I'm just very excited about that. This is something that's been a passion project of mine, and Veronica and my friend Aaron have helped me actualize this. And having people like you, Avis, on the podcast to share their stories is what's actually made this feasible and possible, and helped us to reach those communities out there. And I just want to point out that a couple of those nations where people are listening to our podcast, and like if you're watching the YouTube version of this podcast right now, you're going to see like I'm getting emotional as I talk about this. But it's actually illegal for people to be gay in those countries. And there are obviously people who are listening in those countries who are part of the LGBTQ community and who cannot legally, and the punishment is death in some of those places, who cannot be their authentic selves. And that's just like it breaks my heart that that's a reality for those people. So for everybody who is listening in our international community out there, like, thank you for tuning in to the It's Okay to Be Gay podcast, and for trusting us to share these amazing, incredible stories for people who are going through these things in their lives. I encourage you, all of you who are out there listening, to check out our website. It's okay to be gay podcast.com. We have a great Instagram page, and we are on Facebook. Feel free to message us through any of those platforms. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to share your stories as well. So there's ways to contact us online, and I would love to get to know you guys better, everybody who's out there listening. But it's really amazing. Like I I feel like we're doing a really good thing here, Veronica. Like it's really fun. Just everybody who's out there listening, know that you are recognized and you are appreciated and you are loved. And we appreciate you tuning in to the It's Okay to Be Gay podcast. And we'll see you later on our next episode. So everybody have a great rest of your day, wherever you are, whatever time zone you're listening in. I hope that it's been wonderful.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Avis. Thank you, Veronica.
Ta-ta for
And
now.
we'll see you guys later.
A bientôt. Bye bye.